which I did on the 6th of January. General Young I found very quickly to be a very impressive, very unusual and very remarkable man, and unlike my normal concept of a British general, he was extremely sympathetic, I think, to Cyprus and Cypriot affairs, and I think he was an extremely fair man. The first day I was there, I spent accompanying him on a mission to Paphos, and then I was sent off to go and locate and talk to Mr. Denktash, which I did at some length on the 7th, just before Denktash departed abroad for Turkey and London. But interpreting for the general was not a very creative sort of occupation, and he said that he had decided that he was going to create a tripartite mediating initiative for Cyprus, and that would consist of 3 or 4 patrols coordinated by a British officer in each case, but also containing a Turkish officer and a Greek officer from the contingents that were in Cyprus. So, starting on the 8th of January, I set out really in a very naive sort of way, not knowing what I was going to find, accompanied by my Greek and Turkish officers, and essentially what we found was a situation of something near anarchy and of chaos. Central authorities had lost their ability to communicate with the regions. Local strong men had created their own little leadership and their own fiefdoms. Everybody had picked up their hunting rifles and put up barriers and sandbags, and the villages were all barricaded against each other and against other villages. I mean, it was like something out of medieval times. I didn't know what I was going to. And the press was being very alarmist and vitriolic. But very quickly one found that everywhere one went, in fact, there was an immediate willingness for people to re-engage, and that the problems that there were almost all really quite small local problems that had been escalated into major confrontations. So we began to set up a series of joint regional committees or village committees all the way across the area. And the area that had been allocated to me was the whole northern area of Cyprus. That's running from Kokina right up to the Rizokapisa and as far south as Famagusta. So it was a huge area, and it contained all of the areas that are now occupied by the Turkish army. So I have a real background of having drunk innumerable cups of coffee in every single coffee house across that region, and smoked a lot of cigarettes, which I gave up at the time. Growing out of that, I mean, it became clear that one had to connect with the central leadership in Nicosia. I'd been given an introduction by a friend to Mr. Kyprianou, but he didn't really want to talk to me, but he said his wife invited me to go and have tea with her, and she said, well, Mr. Kyprianou to leave and the British being back, and didn't particularly want to talk to the British, but he suggested that I should go and talk to Mr. Papadopoulos, who she thought was more sympathetic to the idea of a negotiated settlement, which I did. And starting from there, I mean, I got to know Tassos Papadopoulos very well. I got to know Tassos Panagidis very well. Tassos Panagidis was then the secretary to Makarios. And through them, I had an extraordinary ability to communicate straight into the Greek Cypriot leadership. On the Turkish Cypriot side, I went straight to Dr. Kuchik himself, found him very receptive. Denktash had by this time gone abroad. And it became quite clear from early on that Kuchuk was groping about and keen to see a solution to the problems. And it became clear that Makarios was ready to go along with that. So both from Makarios and from Kuchuk, we got very strong direct support for the patrols. I got signed letters of non-interference from Siourgagis. Denktash instructed TMT that they were to be supportive of my efforts. So we began to have a remarkable reception everywhere. And the more we went on, the more we found that the leadership in Nicosia, despite the small size of the island, I mean, simply did not understand or know what was going on in the outer regions. The reporting was basically through police intelligence channels, and there was a huge distortion being built into that reporting. So I had further meetings this time with General Young, and I said, look, if we're to be effective, and if you want to have mediation as the lead element of the whole of your peacekeeping operation, you know, you've got to authorise us to have a primary responsibility of reporting first of all to Makarios and Kuchuk, and then afterwards to you. You know, I'm not going to be your spy going around gathering information. I'm delighted to run a mediating role with the support of the Greek and Turkish officers, but I have to feel that I'm working for the Cypriots and not working for some outside element. And Peter Young went along with it absolutely completely. He said, you've got my total authority, you can use my name, and he said, you can submit daily reports if you wish to Makarios and Kuchuk, and you can edit those before you pass them on to me. So, I mean, I say this because I think this is a sort of remarkable, and maybe the only time that it's happened. There was somebody there who, although he was empowered and had the peacekeeping force behind him, nevertheless, his feeling was that he was totally and 100% committed to Cypriots rather than to some shadowy people in London. I would also say that General Young, I think it's critical to this background, when he talked about drawing the green lines, he said to me and to the other patrol officers, we had to draw something there simply to stop fighting. But he said, if those green lines are still there in 3 or 4 months, you know, we have lost. The objective is to get rid of those. So he said, your primary objective is to recreate normal structure of peace in the countryside, to recreate a normal process of political control over the countryside, and to achieve the removal of the green lines. So by early February, we had advanced, I would say, a long way in terms of the time scale that we had had. But in the first week of February, a series of events started that again became apparent to me and to people in headquarters that they were promoted from outside. We were told there was going to be a visit by a leading American diplomat, and this was to do with the outsiders' proposal for solution of the Cyprus problem. And in advance of this visit, there were a series of provocations and conflagrations. I mean, curiously, apparently started from within each community, but then within each community there were these elements of NATO intelligence forces who would have been the ideal people to promote such violence. But it was very unnatural, and the first, as far as I was concerned, the first one happened at a village called Koshi, and then there was then a flare-up in Limassol, and then there was an attack on a village called Iosizomenos, which came from an assassination against 3 Greek Cypriot police officers who'd been visiting the water station. The problem was that the response to that assassination was totally the wrong one. I mean, the Greek Cypriot leadership simply sent in a huge body of parastatal forces with ring guns and blasted away at the village, whereas in fact the people who'd done the assassination had disappeared into the far distance, and they probably came from the Turkish army anyway rather than from TMT. In any event, at the culmination of these events of early February, I was asked by Peter Young to look after this visiting American diplomat, and the name meant absolutely nothing to me. I was told he was the right hand of somebody called Dean Acheson, who was the Secretary of State.